All right, let's do it. Well, we had some mild technical difficulties in the Movewell studio today for Adapt and Achieve, but we're rolling now. So
We adapted and we achieved.
yeah, we adapted and we achieved. That's we did that on purpose today. So and we did that because we have a very special guest today. But before we kick off, I don't even know if our guest today is Spence Sheldon. I'm gonna go ahead and ruin the suspense for you all. But Spence, one thing that I do in the beginning of every episode is I thank our unofficial sponsors. So what that means is usually whatever drink of choice that myself or our guest has, I'll thank our unofficial sponsors. And all unofficial sponsors means is they don't pay us any money. We just like their stuff. We consume their product, and most of the time it's Spencer's Coffee, if I'm being honest. But today, unfortunately, family stuff got in the way, so it's Monster Energy. I'm not proud of this one, Sergio. So I'm not proud of it. I think Spence has some just coffee from the Movable office over here. What do you got?
I have coffee from my dad's office.
Okay.
The rain, the drive on the way over here, I had
Okay.
to stop. I didn't like where my energy level was. I'm
Okay.
typically not a guy that drinks coffee past a certain time or I won't sleep.
Okay.
But I stopped in, got a little pod from my dad's office, and
So shout out to Steve for that one.
Steve, appreciate it, man. I'll get you your mug back.
Yeah, better
Hopefully.
get that back. So today's unofficial sponsor, Monster Energy. I feel like I'm back in high school, drinking Monster Energy and stopping at the gas station to get snacks. But like I said, today, very special guest, Spence Sheldon. Just an amazing guy. If you know Spence, if you don't, you'll understand it after this episode airs. Or if you listen right now, you'll figure it out throughout this episode. Spence is a dad, husband, son, brother, business owner, and most recently, two titles. Most recently, Spence is an Ironman. Spence finished his first Ironman. He did Ironman 70.3 Florida. And when I initially texted Spence, I was like, hey, man, you want to come on the podcast and talk about your experience with Ironman Florida? That was, at the time, was all that we had planned for today's episode. And that'll be majority of today's conversation. But I think it was the day after I texted you, right? Day after I texted Spence about coming on the podcast, he was awarded Small Business Owner of the Year in Bowling Green by the Bowling Green Area Chamber of Commerce, which is a massive accomplishment. So kudos to you for that, man. We were just talking offline. He was saying it's been such an emotional week, such a big week. So I'm sure it has been, right?
I mean, I'll cry thinking about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's been a good week, man.
Yeah.
It's been I thank you for inviting me onto the pod because it has been an emotional week. It's been a roller coaster of a week, adrenaline fueled week. But this was a good way to kind of land the plane,
Yeah.
get my heart rate down, kind of just talk about it. I've been able to digest it now for about 4 or 5 days, and then get back to life as usual.
Yeah.
I think I'm kind of ready for that. I don't know. It's been a great week, but this was when you invited me to do this. There was so much to unpack for the race, and then when I won the award, there was so much to unpack there. Knew that life had to carry on as usual because that's just what we do as business owners and I guess husbands and fathers. And so I wanted a way to unpack it.
Mhm.
I just didn't know how or when I was going to have time. And this kind of dialogue is a great format for that. So thank you.
Yeah.
You have no idea what it meant to me when you texted me. I was like, man, just to have it recorded. I don't care if this goes anywhere, but just for me to be able to recall this week and have this podcast out to where my kids one day can hear it is truly special. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And I know how, I mean, we were talking, before we started recording, how, about that 5 to 7 day mark is pretty special after you've done like a big event because your mind and your body kind of start to decompress a little bit. And I'm the same way. Like I love talking things out when it's like, especially something that I'm excited and proud of.
Right.
And it's obvious that you have two really big things that happened this week. That a year from now you might be like, yeah, that was cool, that was fun. But right now, like it's so relevant in your life that you're like, yeah, like I want to talk about it. I want to decompress and like just share my experience because it's kind of a way for you to relive it too. And I'm excited to dive into it. And that's what we were saying before, like I said, before we started recording. When I've done event like endurance events or ultra events, usually like a week later, that's when I'm like most fired up because I'm like, wow, that I remember that moment being so hard and I felt like I wanted to quit and I was like, how am I going to get through this? But then now I look back and I'm like, I did do it though. It's like, what else am I capable of? So I think that's why today's conversation is going to be so important. And we'll talk about that from not just, physical fitness, but also as a dad and husband and business owner and navigating those challenges, because that's also really prominent. And I know I've listened to another podcast you've done. You've talked about, late nights and the grind that it takes to starting a business and then now owning multiple businesses. So I definitely wanted to get into all that. But first things first, before we jump into Ironman, I want you to give a short intro for those who don't know you. Just talk about who's Spence, where's he from, where did he go to college, what did he do in college, and then maybe shortly after, and then we'll start diving into the details.
Yeah, for sure. So I am from Bowling Green, Kentucky, born and raised, pretty much been here my whole life. Went to Bowling Green Christian Academy, was kind of my elementary schooling and middle school. High school, I ended up at Warren Central High School. I loved every second of it. Finished out my career at IMG Academy in Florida. I was two-sport athlete at Central, kind of pivoted, switched gears into basketball my senior year of high school. My main focus was kind of that arena, and that's kind of what led me to IMG. Broke my ankle my junior year. I was decent. I was good, good enough to be looked at a high level, and I kind of knew that. And when I shattered my ankle, I was already on the fence. How about that? I wouldn't say that I was just a stud muffin out there, but at the same, a little undersized. But my dream was to play at Division I level, like every kid's dream is. And so, anyways, shattered my ankle. So I lost my junior season. And so what IMG afforded me was to get that season back because it's an independent school. And so, like, here in Kentucky, KHSAA, requires 15, 16 games.
So you broke your ankle junior year at Warren Central? Okay,
yes.
gotcha.
So I didn't
then
have that basketball season.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Okay.
And so what IMG afforded me was a 36-game season, to where I could get those games back and to also be put in front of scouts and things like that again, or recruiters, not scouts, at the college level again, because I was already on the fence. And so that's kind of how I landed there. Obviously, I had uncles and family there as well, so I wasn't going in at it blindly. And so landed at IMG, went there. I tell people that's kind of where I actually grew up. I moved away from home at 16, 17 years old, and you take politics completely out of it, and you're competing at a high level against the best athletes in the world. And coaches really don't care about mommy and daddy. They don't care. It takes all the BS that we struggle with, I guess in a natural setting, completely out of it. You're there to do a job. You're there to perform. And if you don't perform, just like the college level, you're not going to stick around. So 16, 17 years old, I got a lot of hard lessons. Shout out to Coach Vince Walden, one of my favorite people in the world. And so did that, came back to Western Kentucky after IMG, went to school there, walked on and played basketball there for 3 years, played for Coach McDonald, played for Coach Harper, went to business entrepreneurship school while I was there. And then after college, moved to Tennessee for a little while, chasing that high, I guess, of what an Ironman does for you, what basketball did for me, competing at a high level. So music has always been a passion of mine. So I went down there to quote unquote write music and be in the industry. And I was serving tables at Pinewood Social at the time. And once I figured out that I wasn't, Morgan Wallen's a little controversial, but I'll say his name anyways. Once I figured out I wasn't Morgan Wallen, I kind of reverted back, but I did fall in love with hospitality. So to wrap this thing up, soon after that, I opened my first restaurant back at home here in Bowling Green. Soon after that, I got married. Now I got 2 kids, and so that's kind of the Spark Note version of my life and how it kind of evolved. But I mean, I can unpack those seasons for hours, but we don't have time.
That's awesome, man. Well, one thing we have in common is both attended Western Kentucky University. I think we just missed each other in terms of you playing basketball and me cheering. I cheered at Western from 14 to 18. Yeah. So I had Coach Harper for I think 2 seasons, and then Rick, and then Coach Stansbury came in. I think it was or maybe 1 season. So I didn't have him very long.
I would have had you if I wouldn't have. And we can talk about this, but I quit my senior year.
Okay, that I guarantee that's where were you and George the same year?
That's my roommate.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you all were the same class though.
Yeah, me and George played
Okay.
at
I
Central
had George one
together.
season, so I
Yeah,
just missed you
you
then.
missed me by one. And I called Coach Harper before I won Small Business Person of the Year, and I said, I just want you to know that I'm about to win this award. I kind of found out 20 minutes prior. Just a couple people I had to call, and I just kind of looked at him and I said, I'll never forget, put my jersey on your desk and quitting that day at Western. It's not who I am, but I learned so much through that process, and it was my promise to myself post that ordeal that I would never quit anything else in my life. And I just want you to know how much you helped me evolve as a person, and know you can't be here, yada, yada, yada. So, yeah, that's a big part of my story. Quit my junior year, focused on business and trying to figure out who I was as an individual, that's for sure. But that's where we missed each other, because I graduated high school in 2011. So
Okay.
I was
Yeah.
1 year off.
Right there. Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. I mean, I think one thing that WKU is great at is, it's a D1 institution, but it has such a small feel. Being a non-power 5 school, you get that like sense of like closeness with pretty much everybody that you see, like especially at sporting events. Like WK Athletics is such a close knit organization, and like the fans, and so that's what's cool about Bowling Green is you can be so involved still as a fan. Like you can really feel a sense of involvement and have a lot of impact as a fan.
And if you were born and raised here, you understand the tradition too.
Yeah.
I think if you weren't in it, or maybe our generation, how about that?
Mhm.
We know the tradition. Obviously, we've seen better years, but the tradition of the Coach Felton days and the Darren Horn days, and those days shaped me as an individual, because I just allowed me to dream, and so those are the days that I remember a diddle vividly. And then obviously being a player and now trying to get us back to where we need to be, but the NIL thing screwed all that up.
Yeah.
We don't have time for that.
Yeah, that's a whole different beast and a whole different conversation. But like I said earlier, the main talk of today, I really would just want to like explore, how your Ironman experience was, because that's obviously something that you had a lot of, you faced a lot of adversity during it, and you had to overcome a lot of that stuff. And you can sit back now and you can really take all that in and be like, oh my gosh, I remember how low I felt in that moment. But I think that translates to a lot of areas of life. So let's go back to when you quit, when you handed your jersey to Coach Harper, your junior year, after your junior season, and you wanted to focus on business. What did it look like from there? Like, because obviously you were giving up something that you loved, that meant a lot to you. So what did that transition look like when you were finishing school? You're going into business. Let's skip the Tennessee part. But like when it came to opening your first business,
Right.
What did that process look like, and how did it feel?
I think it's the most under talked about transition for any athlete, whether it be cheerleading, whether it be basketball. But I think you work your tail off for one thing for 24 years of your life. Well, for me, I guess it was a quit, I guess when I was 21. And now it's gone. And everything that you thought you were, your identity, is gone. And you're 21 years old. Your brain hasn't fully developed. Life is still so blurry to you. And so that was probably one of the hardest seasons of my life alone. Right now, you got a family that you can go at things together, and that's been a beautiful transition. But by myself, and it was me to blame, right? Like when you're trying to figure yourself out, you don't want to admit at an early age that you don't know who the hell you are. And I think I isolated myself on purpose. Drugs, alcohol, girls, you name it. And that was an extremely tough season for me, and I didn't want to tell anybody. And I think because, like I said, basketball kept me accountable. 5 a.m. practices, curfews, dorm checks, lunch checks. I mean, basketball held me accountable. And then you're old enough now to make your own decisions. So, of course, you have parents that are praying for you and want the best for you. But in the end, it was still me versus me, and just like these races and things. But yeah, that was a tough transition for me. Ultimately, came out of it. I think that was just a praying mama. I don't really have a secret sauce.
Shout out to Terry for that one, huh?
Thanks, Terry. I think there was no secret sauce. I can't remember the day I, quit doing the drug. I just remember I quit. I don't. There wasn't like a pivotal moment, and you can't help but to think that it's a mom that's on her knees somewhere praying that, her son comes home and gets out of Nashville in a season where he was struggling to figure out who he was. So that's how that was kind of the transition. And then you come home and, we can talk about the Donatos portion, but I opened up my first business at 24, and that alone is a whirlwind, right? I mean, from 21 to 24, I can sit here and pretend that I became everything that the good Lord wanted me to be, but that's just not the case.
Mm-hmm.
I was still young, still trying to figure out a lot about myself, and did some things remarkably well, but did some things that weren't. And that was a tough transition. I was handed the keys to a Lamborghini that I probably shouldn't have been able to drive at that point in business, and by the grace of God, we came through and we've done well, and love my team and kind of how we've all evolved. But hopefully, I touched on some things if you want to piggyback on anything, but that was kind of the transition. That was tough.
Yeah.
That was extremely tough on me coming out of basketball, trying to figure out who I was to opening up my first business. If you want to know more about why I chose Donatos and those things, we can get into that, but that was kind of the transition.
Yeah, I definitely want to hear about that because my wife and I love Donato's. It's like our go-to pizza spot in town now. And as of honestly fairly recent, really the last year. And but yeah, I love that you touched on the transition because I think that's something that a lot, especially, that I know, pro athletes struggle from the transition when they retire, but I think the student athlete to, lack of a better term, civilian life, just being a normal person is really hard, especially when you're playing a sport like football, baseball, basketball, like that.
Yeah.
You have so much, like you said, you have so much structure. You have somebody constantly holding you accountable, checking in on you, and then like you said, you're handed the keys to your life, and you're like, hey, go, figure it out now.
There we go.
And you lose the accountability that you had. And so really, everybody's different. Some people may handle it with pure grace and 100% humility, whatever. But I think it's hard. Like, it was hard for me to go from cheerleading to this. And there's a lot less structure. There's a lot less resources. And that was challenging for me. I think for me, the biggest part was the physical aspect of it, of having the team and all that. So I'm glad that you touched on that because I think that is a struggle. It's so hard. And I think already that 21, especially as a guy, I think that 20 to 25-year-old mark is really hard anyway because your brain is starting to develop to its full capacity. So we hope. And it's hard because you try to fill voids or gaps in your life with what you think you need. And so for some people, it's different for everybody.
And for me too, that was right when social media started popping off. So, I went from kind of me versus me and my friends to me versus the world. And you get caught up in that. And I did, right? You now you have access to everyone's life and what they're doing and their highlight reels. And we weren't brought up on it. So we didn't really know how to handle it. I think today in society, we try to do a better job, but I didn't necessarily know how to handle that. So yeah, those years are wild, man.
Yeah.
Crazy year. But yeah, trying to figure out who you were outside of ball, and then now you have access to everyone else's life overnight.
Yeah.
It's a crazy transition. We grew up in a wild kind of little generation, but everyone's got their perks and everyone's got their downfalls. So I'm not acting like our generation had any worse than any.
It's all relative.
It was just, it's all subjective.
Yeah, absolutely. So before I'm chomping at the bit to get to the Ironman stuff, but I am extremely interested in why Donatos, because I have thought about that, especially because you opened your first location was in Bowling Green on Fairview, right?
Yes.
The Fairview location, and then you opened another in Bowling Green.
Yes.
Okay, and then 2 in Tennessee.
Yes.
Is that right? Okay.
They were already open. I just went and bought them.
Yeah. Okay, gotcha. So I think the biggest question, why Donatos? What made that brand stand out to you? That franchise stand out to you?
I'll make this really quick because it's kind of boring. But I was in Nashville. I was getting those phone calls from my parents that we were talking and alluding to earlier. Come home, come home, come home. My parents had already kind of said they would help me out with my first venture, which was, I was hard-headed, right? I was a male, didn't want anybody's help.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone in this town was going to assume that anyways. And I was just hard-headed. I was like, I'm going to do this thing on my own. Me and my dad had a knockdown, drag-out fight one day. He just kind of grabbed me, said I didn't work as hard as I did for my kids to start where I did. And that was like a blast into the future of 31-year-old Spence with 2 kids, right? I look back now at that conversation and I'm like, man, I can't wait to have the same conversation to my kids. But long story short, I was looking for things to do, and I was telling my parents that I wanted to do restaurants. They thought I was crazy, I'm sure, because it was just such an off the wall thing. We're in healthcare, we're in real estate,
Right.
But restaurants is nothing that we've never really ventured into. So long story short, I was driving by the Donatos on Broadway that I headed into work, and there was a line out the door. And I was like, I've become a pizza snob, but I was not a pizza snob. But I was definitely intrigued by the fact that there was a line out the door of a pizza restaurant. So much that goes into that. But I drove by, I called my dad. I'd thrown a bunch of stuff at my dad, and he pretty much just kind of given up on, Spencer's just buying time so he can stay down there and hide and do all his things, right? And so I would throw some concepts at him, and he would be all about them. And ultimately, I would just kind of, no, I don't want to do it. And but this one I was kind of serious because I did like the vibe. I did like the curb appeal of the restaurant. And we had already said if I was to do restaurants, we were going to have to franchise, right? Because Dad didn't have an expertise in the field. He had expertise in customer service, in the service industry, but did not have, when it comes to vendors and things of that nature, like we were just so unfamiliar. So past that Donato's, I called my dad, said, hey, I don't know what this pizza place is, but there's a line out the door. Would you mind looking into it? He just kind of said, yeah, Spence, I'll look into it. Well, I knew what that meant. He wasn't looking into it. And so I think that is the theme of my whole life, man. Just taking that first step towards something different. Like if you don't like where you're at, confused, conflicted, the best way to move is just one step at a time. It's not some crazy. Some people think they got to move states, countries to get out of a situation. I'm just begging you just to take a step in another direction and then try to take another step in that direction. And, eventually you find yourself way over here. You're not really sure how you got there, but it's a lot better than where you were. And so I called Donato's at 24 years old. I called them. I started talking to Jim Bender. I don't even think he works there anymore, but he was kind of the third party liaison between the franchise and potential franchisees. And he treated me like an adult, and I needed that at 24. I was struggling. I didn't know who I was, and I wanted someone to take me serious. I knew that I had a lot in me that I couldn't wait to show the world. I knew that I had a lot of energy. I knew that I cared about people a lot, and I wanted someone just to take a chance on me other than my parents, because that's what everyone suspected. Yeah. Like his parents are just going to bail his butt out. And I was level-headed enough to know that, and I just wanted somebody else. I wanted the world to recognize what I felt I had in me, rather than my parents that I felt like they were going to do it because they had to. So Donato's treated this 24-year-old like adult. They never talked about financing. They never talked about the money aspect because that was going to be really awkward. And so they literally like 3-4 weeks. And so I had the plan. And that's when I called Dad back and said, not really a plan, but I said, here's everything that I know about this. This is Donato's Pizza. They're out of Columbus, Ohio. I've been on the phone with them for 3-4 weeks straight. Now that I'm taking an initiative, now Dad gets excited, right? Because he didn't believe in anything that I was saying, and rightfully so, for months and months. And so we end up flying up to Columbus. They call it a Discovery Day. We sat in a boardroom with Tom Kraus, Jane Grote, different COO at the time, Doug Curry, a lot of the guys at the front office, and their morals, values, principles were very aligned with what we did as a family. And I think that was ultimately the straw that broke the camel's back. Yes, I tried the pizza, but I thought every pizza
goes
was good.
Beyond that.
Yeah,
too.
but I tried the pizza. I thought they had a good product. Obviously, you signed your NDAs and they can disclose the business model. So I liked my business model. That was where Dad came into play. And I like the idea of just keeping my feet moving. I didn't want an office job. I didn't want a desk job. I wanted to stay active, and the restaurants allowed for that. Went up there and I kind of signed the dotted line, said we were going to do this thing, signed on to 3 stores. And I think that was kind of their thing, like you 3 or bust. And so we signed on to 3 that day. Came back, started working on the Fairview location, getting it up and going. Put the second one at Cave Mill, and then I went back and bought that Donato's that first got me intrigued.
Okay.
Which is
Wow,
really
that's cool. Full circle.
So
Yeah.
came back 5 years later, went and bought that Donato's that had the line out the door, and the line out the door was it was their opening day.
Oh wow.
So it wasn't Tuesday.
Yeah.
It was their opening day, and Jay DeMarcus of Rascal Flats was playing.
Oh
And
well.
so,
Hey, whatever sparks your interest, man.
isn't it crazy how God works? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I
Of
got
all
cold
days.
chills thinking about it. I mean, it was just Spence driving by. I mean, he is directing our path, and we have no idea. And
Absolutely.
It was opening day. Jay DeMarcus was playing. That's why the line was out the door. And then 5 years later, I go back and I buy that store, and that store has taught me more about business and in life than any of the stores I have. It's probably one of the least successful that I have. But that store, I mean, there's just like a bond. But I can't, because it's just it's a wild deal. So anyways, it's weird to have a bond with four walls, but that store's taught me a lot. So it's cool to talk about that. But then we bought the Murfreesboro store. So we have 4 rocking and rolling right now.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
I love it. And yeah, we'll kind of tie back to the significance of you and Donato's. We mentioned the small business person, and I definitely want to hear about that because I think that just totally tied together your whole week and how special it's been. You said that, you alluded to that in the beginning of the show. But yeah, I love that. I love hearing about business adventures, especially somebody that I'm so close in age with too, because we're in such similar parts of our lives, and our paths are so different, and everybody's paths at some point generally take a different turn than they thought it was going to be. And mine was the same way. And so it's really cool to hear it. Although they're subjective to us, it's so cool we can, resonate in some way with one another.
Parallels.
Yeah, a lot. So next, let's dive in. Let's talk about the Ironman Florida, man. So before we talk about race day, because I want to hear, how you felt the day before, the morning of, how the race felt, what you ate, all that stuff. But what intrigued you? What pushed you to sign up for Ironman Florida? Where did the idea spark? Was it a person? Was it a moment? Was it an event you were attending? I want to hear about it.
Yeah, this is where we'll have a lot in common because I follow you, and I think we follow a lot of the mutual people in the running space. And obviously, you've been doing this thing a lot longer than me, so I always kind of look and see who you're following and who you're reposting. And so Jesse Itzler.
Oh, love that guy, man.
So I mean, I think there's so many seasons where there's so many people that have helped me get through so many seasons of life when I needed just a word or a motivating thing that just resonates. And that should take a lot of pressure off of us, right? Like, Bob Goff carried me for a while, right? And then now it feels like it's kind of changed into Jesse Itzler and 2 totally different walks of life, but probably the same personality, same vibe. But that should take a lot of pressure off you as an individual. Like, man, sometimes, people need you for a season. And that's dope, man, because it doesn't feel like you have to be there. You're not there forever. You're there for a season. Trust that you're there for a season. So right now, Jesse seems to be my guy. And so I was definitely as big as I've ever probably been. And I was giving myself so many excuses. I think when you get married and you have kids, you have business, it's easy. It's so easy to give yourself an excuse, and the world's not going to judge you for it. Right? Because they're valid excuses. But if you're not sleeping at night and you're not genuinely happy, who cares, right? So didn't really like seeing myself in the mirror. Wasn't crazy about where I was in life. I mentioned that Nashville store. Financially, we were in a crazy, crazy place with my company. I just kind of saw it dwindling, and I just said, I need a hard reset. So obviously following Jesse, doing the ultra obviously catapulted a lot too, because I just did that, on a whim. That was extremely whimsical, but I paid the price. Like for 2 or 3 weeks later, I couldn't even walk. And I was like, Spence, like, dude, you're not showing any reverence to this sport. You're just an absolute idiot. Like, what are you doing? Like, because no one's going to go run and do these races if it affects their life for months later, right? Like, what's the point? What's it worth to you, right? Just to get a picture saying you ran 40 miles. So anyways, that's when I kind of knew too that I kind of enjoyed the sport, I guess, after the ultra, and I enjoyed the competition behind it, and I enjoyed competing with myself because I've always been in a team setting. And so Jesse Itzler talks about his misogi, talks about doing one hard thing every year. And I need that accountability because like every arena that I'm in, it feels like I'm the one calling the shots, whether it be my family, my business, my relationships. And I think maybe if we were to dive deeper into Spence, I probably do that on purpose, and I felt I need the accountability because no one really tells me what to do, right? Other than my faith. And um, if I don't have that accountability, I won't go to the gym. I won't eat healthy. I'll give myself a million excuses why not to. And so I always have to have that scoreboard. Basically, I got to have something in the pipeline to keep Spence accountable. And that's what the Ironman felt like. I showed up the day of Ultra having trained maybe 3 or 4 weeks later, and I did it, right? Okay, whoop-de-doggone. Dude, that showed me that I got to go harder. I got to do something crazy or else, so anyways, that's kind of where it kind of evolved from. But definitely just an accountability piece. Yeah. What's going to keep me going to the gym? What's going to keep me in tip-top shape? What's going to keep me in a better headspace when I look at the mirror? And that's kind of where the Ironman kind of evolved from. And then obviously all the life lessons that I want my kids and my wife to see me do hard things. I want my kids to look back and know that just because it's hard doesn't mean we can't do it.
Yeah, I love that. And I think I think that's something that people write off too often, is that you shouldn't have to have something. You shouldn't have to have something to hold you accountable or to keep you fit, to make you want to take care of yourself. But I mean, I think you get to a stage. Everybody's stage of life is different, and when you're single and 22 years old, or you're living in a city where it's just you, obviously it's going to be easier to train organically or without anything in your pipeline to train for, that compared to if you're 30 years old, you're a dad and you're a husband, you have your family near you, you own a business, or even if you're an employee, like obviously that's totally different. So I think that's something that people write off too often. And since I become a dad, I kind of need that too, because fitness for pretty much since a year after I finished college has just been something that's organic to me, and I just fit it in. And after I became a dad, I was kind of in the similar position where I was to a point where I was like, I don't like how I feel, I don't like how I look, and I needed a hard reset. And that's why I did 75 hard. And I
watched you do that.
Yeah, and I felt silly kind of doing it because I'm like, I've been in such a better place of my fitness, and I had to really put my ego aside for that. And I had to realize, like, yeah, I've run 100 miles, I've run a ton of ultras, I've done a lot of hard things, and here I am doing 75 hard. Like, to me, I was like, I feel like I'm doing a beginner challenge. If somebody's beginner in fitness, but I was like, it doesn't matter. I'm going to put my ego aside, and this is what I need at this moment in my life. And I essentially, just like you, dude, like I needed something to strive for. Right. And one quick story about Jesse Itzler is, it was November of 2021, I believe. I did this thing called the Calendar Club Challenge, and I thought I came up with it. It was funny. I decided I was going to do it in like probably May of 2021. I was already running a pretty significant amount of miles a week. And I was like, I'm going to do whatever day of the month it is. That's how many miles I'm going to run. And I'm going to fundraise for the National Eating Disorders Association. And so I started doing it. And then after like the third day, somebody was like, oh, are you doing Jesse Itzler's challenge? And I was like, who? And they're like, Jesse Itzler, his Calendar Club challenge. And they sent it to me. I was like, oh. And so then I found Jesse, and I was like, oh, this dude is amazing. And I was like, and he's already done this. So, and it was so cool to now, like, I started following Jesse right then, and he is amazing.
Dude, he's the best. He's the best. He reminds me so much of myself because I do tend to get bored with things. I think I've had a membership at every gym in this daggum town. It's not, and it's only because I just get bored with certain things. Obviously, Rock Box is my go-to, and shout out to Seton.
Yep.
I feel like we're a lot alike, right? Like he had so many different businesses and different things, buying and selling, from jets to coconut water to DJ. Like, it's just like I respect that, because I feel a lot like that. That I need to constantly switch gears, keep me motivated, keep me interested, and it's been, dude. He's been awesome. He's been awesome to follow and to kind of motivate me. And kind of push me in that direction. But he's not a try guy, which is funny. It's like you kind of you have these people in your life, and then you kind of make it your own.
Yeah, exactly. He did do Ultraman though, I believe, right?
Probably.
Which, it's like Ultraman is it's like a 4-day event. It's in Arizona, and
that's like it's their thing.
Yeah. And so so basically it's like it's a swim, bike, run, and you swim double of whatever like the full Ironman distance is. So you swim, would that be like 4.8 miles, and then you bike. Full Ironman's like what, 156. So then you bike like 300 something miles, and then that's broken into 2 days, and then you
It's
do like
crazy.
a 40 something mile run. And I think Jesse has done that once. And when I found out he did that too, I was like, wow, this guy's one. He's so captivating, and just
Right.
I mean, he just listen to him speak, you're like, oh my
And it's so
gosh.
organic, man.
Oh yeah, it
It's
really
so
is.
cool.
And he's a brand builder, no doubt. He's an
Yeah,
entrepreneur.
he gets it.
Yeah, so he's so cool to follow. So Jesse Itzler, shout out to that guy for, I mean, yeah, and like you said, somebody who can impact you. He didn't, it wasn't even him doing a triathlon that impacted you; it was just him. And so that's really cool to
Yeah.
see how he did that. But now let's go into training. How did training feel? How did it look? Obviously, you're an extremely busy guy.
Right.
So how did that feel? And then take us right into a week before, day before, how you felt leading up to actual Ironman Florida.
So the training was wild. I mean, the common theme for the Ironman was I had so many reasons not to do this thing. And I think if the devil isn't messing with you, you're probably not a threat. And so that's kind of the way I see my life at times when I'm like, dude, why do the punches just keep coming? This was something I wanted to do for myself. I very rarely do things for myself. And so I signed up in this November. I forget by December that I even signed up. I did it laying in bed one night, just contemplating a lot of things. So December, I forget that I signed up, and I kind of look at my wife. It's like, man, I signed up for this Ironman. She's like, oh, great. What's that? And I told her, and she was like, you're crazy. Whatever. That's about as far as our conversation goes. So November, December, January, I start training pretty darn hard. Like I was like, man, I got 6 months, 4 or 5 months here to do this. Like I should feel really good about this. And I've never given myself that much time. Typically Spence is just so whimsical. And so literally I immediately started hitting it hard. But guess what? My gym is a boxing gym. So it's like, there's nothing in that gym that I don't have treadmills. I don't have bikes. I don't have pools. I don't have anything that screams you're doing your cardio at Rockbox with boxing gloves. Right. So immediately I should have been like, okay, did I really think through this? So that was like strike number 2. Number 1 was I forgot I signed up. Number 2 is now it's like, okay, now I'm going to train, but my gym really does nothing for me. So I call around. I'm like, hey man, does anybody do it? Like, where do you guys train in the water? How does this work? So I joined Preston in Western.
Okay.
Because that's where I did my swimming. It's closest to my office. Then I joined BAC. And I'm like, okay, so now I got a membership at BAC. I got a membership at Rockbox still with my brother at the time, and then still have a membership now with Preston and diapers. So I'm like, financially, this is already not making sense.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at this thing and I'm going, man, what did I sign up for? I should probably just quit. But I did, man. I shook hands with myself early on and I just said, this is what is going to make you a better business leader, a better husband, a better father. You know this about yourself. You've got to work out. You got to eat clean. You got to have you know this about yourself. So if you give up now, you're not just giving up on yourself. You're giving up on so many people. And that's the way I had to look at it throughout the whole process. So January rolls around. I joined 3 different gyms. Try to come up with some kind of routine. How do you have a routine when your wife's about to have another child? She's 9 months pregnant, and you've got the businesses, you've got all your employees. Like, what kind of routine is this going to look like? And you're working out at 3 different spots. Like, what the freak am I doing? The whole time, none of this is making any sense. Why are you doing this? And so I get somewhat of a routine, but I feel like I still got 3 or 4 months out. So my main workouts were I'm going to not do really any brick workouts to where I go back to back on any event. Right now, I'm going to do, swim twice a day, bike twice a day, or twice a week, and run twice a week. So I was like, if I can get 6 days in a week, whatever that looks like right now, just get a baseline of where your strength is. If you can just do that, right? I had people that were like, you need to get a trainer, you need to get a trainer, you need a trainer. It's just Spence being prideful. I was like, no, I'm already spending all this money.
I say you're already so much in.
Yeah. I was like, no, I'm good. So I was, that's pretty much how my training went. Tried to do 6 days a week. Sometimes I fell to 5, give or take my family. But I was pretty solid. 5 days a week, you could find me. Then, very following month, I have a child, February 17th. And so it's like completely my routine obliterated again at that point. Just when I started making stride in my workouts, I'm like, man, I feel good. My body feels good. Bam, kid. Sleeping a lot. I went from working out in the mornings to the night. You got to want it. It's not for everybody. So I went from working out in the mornings, but the mornings were the only time I had with my kids. And because at night they were going down like 7, 8, and I was typically working that late. So I was going to miss them anyways at night. But so the mornings were the only time I could be with my infant and my 2-year-old. So I switched because I'm an early guy. I've always been an early guy. I would much rather work out in the mornings than at night.
Yeah, same.
And so switched it to night. Come February, because I got my time in the morning to help my wife with the kids, get everything, situated before I went to work. March, I bought another company, immediately switched. I felt like I owed it to Zach, with his, tinting and detailing and everything that he was doing, to jump on board. We started taking off really, really quick. And so I kind of jumped into that venture as kind of like a mentor / venture capitalist / I really didn't feel like I was going to be detailing cars at 20, at 30 years old. And, but we took off so quick. It's a good problem to have. And so I became a worker. So then my schedule is completely obliterated again. But I found time every day, about 1 to 2 hour workouts. So moving to the next month, I think we're in March now. That's when things started ramping up. I'm like, oh shoot, it's here. We've got 60 days. So now you're looking at 2-3 hour workouts. That's one of the things that people don't tell you when you're signing up for a triathlon or something of this magnitude. Like you're biking for 56 miles. So let's just say you jump on your bike and you go for 30, 35 miles. That's every bit of, hour and a half, 2 hours, especially if you're, so new to this like me. And so that's just that. And then you've got to get used to your body going, okay, it thinks it's done, but it's not. Right. And so now you go jump on a treadmill. Well, you're not running a 7-8 minute mile after you bike for 40. And so another hour just to get to a double digit 7-8 mile run. So you're in the gym for 3 or 4 hours. Jacked me up completely, because it's like, who has time to be in the gym for 4 hours? So I was try to do as many brick workouts as I can in one place, meaning I didn't do a lot of training outside on the bike. I wish I would have. I did a lot of training inside on the bike at BAC and then jumped straight into the treadmill because I had to have that time. It's right there together. Yeah. I needed that time back. So I was doing about 20, 25 miles on the bike, jumping on, doing like 8-10 miles runs, leaving, doing that consistently. And then in between days, I was going ahead and doing the full distance of the swim. The swim was fine. Training wise, in the pool, 1.2 miles. I was doing the full swim every time. So I felt good about it. Oh, nice. And then I would do the full swim and get out. And then I would try to run that night when I did my swims. So the days I did swim, my kids would go to sleep, come home, and I'd try to get out and try to run 2 or 3 miles. But that was like the magnitude of my training. Get into the final month. Now it's like extreme. Now it's all about diet, really. Hydration, diet. Where are you at? You've had all this excuse to eat like crap because you've been burning thousands and thousands of calories a day, working out twice a day, tons of cardio. And so going into that last month, it was diet, minimal alcohol, getting good sleep, making sure your body was at tip-top shape. But I was still detailing the crap out of cars, so my body was just breaking down. Restaurants have been doing great. I've got an unbelievable staff, so it pretty much kind of operates itself. Sam kind of runs those for us. And but then fast forward to race day. So the night of, I figured out that I couldn't have headphones. That's how new I am to this. Yeah. So no electronics.
That's the hard part about Ironmans, man.
Dude, I mean, I sat there and I was like, what? Because I was definitely thinking I was going to just like rip this thing, put it in a podcast.
Turn your brain off. Yeah.
And just roll. And if I needed some motivation, I put on some Andy Frisella and, hopefully somebody scream at me and get me going. But dude, it's amazing. It's amazing. Like, that they force you to do that because it is a spiritual experience at that point.
Oh yeah.
It becomes spiritual.
Oh yeah.
Like instead of having that distraction or that thing that's kind of motivating you, it's gone. So the night of, I figured that out. Obviously, it's a lot of terminology. It's a fitness podcast. So it's like wetsuit optional. Am I going to wear a wetsuit? Am I not? It's 76 degrees. I think that's kind of like the magic temperature. If it's below 76, you can wear your wetsuit. If it's not, then it's wetsuit optional. But if you wear a wetsuit and it's wetsuit optional, then you don't qualify for anything. You're just kind of out there. Not that I was there to qualify for anything, but I'm a man, right?
Yeah.
I'm an Ironman.
Come on now.
Like, I'm not gonna just like, who knows what happens, right?
Mhm.
The good Lord may just push me through here, and I may win this thing. And the last thing I'm gonna do is go, holy crap, I wore a wetsuit, so none of it matters. So, anyways, the night of, I trained with a wetsuit out in Old Hickory Lake out at Old Hickory for a couple weeks in a wetsuit. I loved it. Kept my hips up. I was
A lot more buoyancy.
Dude, a lot more buoyancy in that thing. And I was like, dude, this is sweet. So I got used to it. I was like, man, I truly wasn't too worried about the swim the whole time. Everyone else was. And now I got this wetsuit that's literally like I'm a little torpedo. I was like, I love this thing. Night of, no electronics. They're looking at us going, it's going to be, wetsuit optional. You're probably not going. We'll let you know tomorrow morning. But I just kind of mentally said, I don't want to be disappointed the day of the race. I'm making a decision tonight. I'm not going to wear the wetsuit. That way I don't show up. And then if they let us, then, oh, beautiful. That's a win. So I didn't wear a wetsuit. Night of, figure out no electronics. I think like 3 weeks prior, I figured out I had to wear a helmet. Like, I mean, y'all, I was so new to this. So can you imagine? Now, I really haven't trained with a helmet. So now I'm biking 56 with the helmet. The helmet's probably maybe a pound. But, I mean, halfway through that 20, 30 miles, now your neck's hurting. I mean, it's an unbelievable experience. So anyways, there's so many hiccups along the way that I was like, and this, and this, and this. Like, dang, I'm claiming this Ironman after I finish this thing. So day of, I wake up. The race starts at 5:40 a.m. So you're getting up at like 3:34. Our place was about 20 minutes out. We didn't stay in Panama. We stayed on 38. So I was with my buddy Jackson that I'd met while I was down there. Family friends of ours, but I'd never met Jackson. So we met, picked him up. We're going to the race. I had a banana that morning. I had an energy drink, Celsius, and then what else? I had like a piece of bread. Like I had one piece of bread, and obviously I'd already had all my stuff packed out for the day. So that's kind of how it happened. You get there, you check in. That's boring. Well, you've already done your check-in 2 days prior.
Right.
If anybody has questions on that, I can obviously call me. It's boring to talk about, but there's so much there to unpack. But then race day, you get out there, everyone meets on the beach, and you go off in waves. So like your elite Ironman, the pros go off first because they're obviously going after a time. And then, your amateurs like myself, or you're way in the back. So that was a struggle. Like you're sitting there for 20 minutes. The race starts at 5:40. We really didn't go off till like 6:20. So you're sitting there.
Yeah, you're there for a minute.
You're jumping around. You got the jitters. And so, yeah, I'll let you, if you have any questions on that, because, but then eventually you're off.
Yeah.
And then it's just life, man.
Yeah.
It's just 70 miles of life.
So what did I knew there were waves in Ironman. I never really knew the gap of like how long it took in between like each wave. So what did that feel? I mean, were the nerves like at some point where they just like, okay, now I just want to get started?
You get extremely frustrated.
Yeah.
But you understand why they're doing it, because you don't want people swimming on top of each other and things like that. So you respect, why. But for me, first one, not really, you're getting there because you're like, oh shoot, if I'm at that start line at 5:40, then what's,
Right.
I don't know what I thought would happen, but you get there and you're 20 minutes early, and then
rather be early. Yeah.
Right. And then you sit there and you're standing in the sand with a bunch of strangers, and everyone's just kind of jittery. You're listening to conversations of people that's done a million of these things, and I'm sitting there like, I'm about to go jump in this ocean and swim for a mile. And this is my first ones, and they're talking about how they're going to do things. And I'm just like, okay, God, man, I'm winging this thing.
Yeah.
I'm just getting, my goal for the Ironman was I wanted to keep moving. I never wanted to stop moving, and I wanted to finish. Those are the two things, just bite-sized components. I wasn't going to be too complicated with this thing. I just wanted to finish. And so, you jump out into the ocean, you go, it's extremely tough, totally different than a pool. Obviously, I knew that. But the waves and the swells of the ocean were a totally different dynamic. And then obviously swimming with hundreds of people around you. And when you're a people pleaser like me, even when I'm competitive, it's not like this is my sport. It's not like I get out of the way, who I am.
Yeah.
It was like I'm kind of watching around, making sure I don't pop someone in the face or hit their goggles, And so but you get through it. You make the turn out there. You're a half mile out, and when you look back, the people are like pea-sized.
Yeah.
And the swim is all about just heart rate, man. You can freak out there and go, holy crap, look how far I am from shore. I am not Michael Phelps. And so here we go. And so one of the things that I did was try to control my breathing on the swim. That was the biggest thing. If you overexert yourself, especially on the first leg of that race, your swimming fundamentals get out of whack. You start using your legs more than you should. And so you start freaking out, and your fundamental, of the swim is shot. So the main thing with the swim was controlling my breathing, always figuring out, my breathing patterns and how I was going to breathe. The swales will jack you up, right? Like, so you think you're 1, 2, 3, 4, breathe, 1, 2, 3, 4, breathe, or however your breathing rhythm was going to be for the race. But you may be trying to breathe, and then, a swale's come in and you just gargle a bunch of salt water. And so, that was extremely tough. And then you get close to the shore. It's like being on a boogie board when you're like, 12 years old, and you remember riding the wave in, but which no one really talks about is how it also sucks you out, right? Like you're right there, and then all of a sudden it's 10 steps forward, 5 steps back, 10 steps forward, 5 steps back. And that was tough. It was like, man, I'm right here. And so you think that you're just going to like start coasting in, and then all of a sudden it starts bringing you back. And it's like, oh no. And then you wait on another wave, and then it coasts you in and bring you back. And you're like, Spence, why didn't you just stand up? You couldn't. Based on where this was, like, trust me, you don't think I tried? I tried to stand up, start walking, but I was like, oh shoot, here I go, I'm sinking to the bottom. So you pretty much swim all the way to shore, and then like, your body is kind of just pretty discombobulated after 1.2 in the ocean. So you get out and your legs are just like, you're just kind of like trying to gather yourself. And then this is where I really lost a lot of my time, was during the transition.
Oh, really? Okay.
That. Yeah, I mean, just the fundamentals and the mechanics of triathlon races. I don't care if it's an Ironman. I don't care if you're doing one.
It's a lot of logistics.
It's just so much to it. One of the things that I forgot, I knew I had to bring it. This is on me. It's not like was a towel. Oh my gosh, dude. So I get out of the water. I know that I'm about to bike for 56 miles. And I get to my bike, and of course your feet are wet. You've just been walking in sand. And so I'm looking at my socks, and I'm going, so not just wet socks, but sandy wet socks. I was like, this ain't happening. And I was like, I'm not going to be on this bike for 56 miles, have sandy wet socks. So I would like start looking at my bag. I have like a t-shirt in there. And so I don't know if you've ever tried to wipe feet off with a t-shirt, and it's wet and sand. It doesn't do much. And so I'm sitting there just wiping because I was like, I know I have 56 miles, and I know that I'm not, freaking, Brandon Neal. So for me, it was like, I need to set myself up for success. So I sat there for about 5 minutes. You only have about 10 minutes before they dock you. Like in the transition areas. So it's like 5 minutes of me just trying to get my feet dry. So then I throw in my socks, get on my bike. I go to the bathroom. That was the only time I used the restroom, just because I drank so much fluids. I got an IV the day before. I did the Normatec pants the day before. Got a massage the day before. And then that morning, I was just so hydrated. And so you have to use the restroom. So I went, used the restroom. That was the only transition I peed on. And then we take off. And then the bike, man, was the most brutal thing for me. Was that the hardest part of the whole race, you think? Yeah, for sure. For me, it was. I mean, it depends. I mean, everyone's different, right? Like you have your bikers, you have your swimmers, you have your runners, and whatever you're used to and accustomed to is probably going to be where you gravitate to. I just am not a biker. I've never been a biker. I love bikes. They never bother me. But that was the hardest part, because number one is I didn't have the aero bars. The aero bars. Yeah. So I'm on my horns the whole time, which was extremely tough. Did your hands go numb at all? Like I found when I don't have aero bars, I have a road bike, and I found that from where your thumbs are around the handlebars, like my hands would go numb. Yeah, they're all going numb. And so I had a good swim time. I was like 40 minutes. It's kind of like how I trained in the pool. So I was like, man, even though that seemed a lot harder, I did have a good swim time. So I was like, heck yeah, man. So I'm feeling really good about it. And there's thousands of people behind me. Dude, the bike, it was the most humbling experience of my life, because number one, I wasn't very familiar with the bike and the gear changes and how I was going to get right. You know, it is a flat race, but at the same time, there was definitely you still have to change gears too. There was definitely rolling hills, and you had to figure out the gear change. And Nick Walters helped me a bunch with my gear changes. Shout out, he's the Nick. Man. And there was, I had people show me, but I just wasn't, dude. I didn't prepare well as from the fundamentals of this race, and so I get on the bike. I take off, I'm feeling good, and then you get on 98, like headed towards Alice Beach, and it's just you and the blacktop, and we're cruising, and people just started just one by one
Blowing past you.
passing me. And I'm sitting here, what in the world? I was like, my little legs haven't stopped, y'all. The bike the entire time. I'll preface this whole 56 miles with this. My legs never quit moving because that was one of the things, right? I did not want to stop. Yes, like hills, when we're coming down, I coasted a few times, but my little legs never quit moving because I was so convinced that like, it's my bike, right? So I'm sitting here and I just keep on chugging it out. And I'm like, it's 56 miles, right? They're just exerting a lot of energy early on. And I'm going to pass them back later on. Not the case, dude. The whole 56 miles, dude, I'm just getting with people that I'm looking at. I'm going, how are you passing me? So I'm looking at this thing and, that's what we do, right? In life, we start looking around and comparing ourselves. And I'm looking, I'm like, dude, that guy's Cass. I understand why he's passing me. His wheels are a lot thinner than mine. I understand why he's passing me. But you start playing this comparing game and you just start getting really insecure about yourself. And you're like,
takes a toll on you.
Nuts.
Yeah.
And so 56 miles. If you litter outside the trash, you get carded. It's like hockey, you get a little penalty. Yeah. So, that's one thing. I don't want to screw this thing. I don't want to be the guy that's sitting in the penalty box. I'm already getting raked on this bike. And so, I've got my goose, I've got my water. One of the things that I did too, and there's going to be so many people watching this that are probably experienced. They're going to be like, dude, you're a freaking idiot. So my bike, I only have one water bottle. Everyone kind of told me, dude, you need two. But I just assumed there was going to be so many people out there that I could just refill it or I could grab stuff on the way. As long as I just had one on my person, then I just keep using the course water. Dude, mile 30, completely out of water. And you're on 98. So it's like there's 30, 40 miles of this where there's like 10, every 10, 15 miles there's a station. And it's just you and the pavement and it's just scorching heat. So run out of water, run out of all my goose, all my packs about 35 miles in. Like I'm not even I'm almost halfway and I'm out of everything that's on my person that I got gas. Like it's literally gas. Like you're consuming and you're burning so many calories. Like everything you put in your body in those moments, and this, like it literally fuels you. You feel it almost immediately. Yeah. And I ran out. And so I'm sitting here just at the mercy now of Ironman and how they structured their race. Nothing I did was going to give me a competitive advantage. I was just going to keep pedaling and then pray that tents and water were just going to magically appear when I needed them. That was not the freaking case. I'm dying and I'm getting passed left and freaking right. And I'm sitting here, I'm going, this is just like debilitating. Like I was God's honest truth. It was like mile 45, 50. I'm on my way back and I'm like, I'm done. I'd already shaken hands with it because there is a time limit on the bike to where if you don't hit it, then you don't get to do the next leg.
Like cutoffs.
Yeah, there's cutoffs because I got to open up the road, right? Like little Spence can't be out here running this race, 7 p.m. at night. So I get through. At some point, I said, "Listen, I have my whole family down there." I was like, "They're still going to be proud of me. I know my mom, I know my dad, I know my wife, I know their family. They're already just infatuated in the fact that I even signed up and I'm here." So I literally was like, man, if I don't hit that cutoff time on the bike, I was like, I'm done and I'll come back next year and I'll do a lot better. Cause that was the most humbling experience of my life. I think maybe I passed 2 people on the bike, but the whole race was just, and I'll give you a funny story. There's a guy towards the end of it came by, he blows by me. He's gotta be like 67 years old. And he blows by me and he's like, are you okay, buddy?
When he's the buddy
said,
too.
Buddy.
No.
Dude, I flipped in the bird and I said, dude, I'm an Ironman. I didn't, but I was like, I was so frustrated. I was like, don't call me buddy.
Yeah, I'm not your buddy.
I'm not your buddy. He's like, give me a goo. Like, you got some water?
Yeah.
So anyways, bike was my worst leg by far. The good news is running is kind of my forte, and I felt really good about my runs leading into the race. And so that's when I kind of got my time to shine. Okay. I got an hour back on my time because if you go look at your splits and your race times, like the app kind of tells you when you're supposed to finish based on
where you made up time
to, yeah. And so I was supposed to finish it an hour later than I was coming off the bike.
Oh, wow.
So on the bike, when I started running, that's when I started passing people.
Yeah.
But I'll be honest with you, I wanted to give up. I was ready in that transition to go. I barely made the time, by the way, like 5 minutes.
Oh,
The
wow.
cutoff.
That's tight.
So, oh my, so tight. I mean, because that last mile is the longest mile of your life. And so barely made the cutoff. I get there, and now I'm somewhat familiar with the transition. At this point, all I got to do is take my helmet off, put a hat on, and put my shoes on and go. I was going to change socks because I had 2 sets of socks in case the other one was wet, or if I poured water on my back or something. And didn't do that. Just put on my shoes, started running. And that was the most euphoric 13 miles of my entire life.
That's
you
awesome.
finally see your friends and family.
Mm-hmm.
You see them a little bit on the bike coming in, but for 56 miles, you don't see anybody.
Oh,
it's just
yeah.
you and the road. You get there, you finally have a support system because it's a 4-mile loop right there in Inner Panama. I just started running. I was like, okay, God, like, for some reason you let me make the cutoff. Here we go. And then I would have never made it to my event, what I feel the most comfortable doing, if I wouldn't have gone through the swim and the bike that was so unfamiliar to me. And I just thought that was such a life lesson because I was ready to quit. But literally right over that next transition was your bread and butter, was where you were going to actually start building more confidence in yourself. And that's what running did for me. And now I was passing people, and I was passing mile by mile by mile by mile by mile. And I was able to carry myself about 6 miles, which was unreal to me. So swam, biked, ran all the way up to 6. About the mile, I say like 5, 4 or 5 actually, is when I was like, I gotta start walking. Like I'm this is crap. But I was so proud of myself getting to that point. So I think I started doing about like half-mile intervals, and then I did 0.25 intervals, and then that last mile I tried to jog the whole thing. So the run, difficulties on the run, there really wasn't any other than the fact of
Your body was just
legs
taxed by that point.
Just
Yeah.
done. It's all mental.
Yeah.
And looking back on the race, that's what I would tell people, man. It's really not a battle between you and the bike, the road. It's you and this thing right here the whole time.
Yeah.
It's a mental battle because I had 8. It was 70.2 mile run, walk, or run, bike, swim. I had 70 reasons to not do this thing. Every mile I had a reason in my head just floating around, and you just don't listen. You just keep going. And, that's essentially how it went. When I came across that finish line, I don't want to just breeze by that. If you have any questions about the race, I want to talk about that, and then I'll talk about the finish because that's the most emotional thing, and I want to give that time that it deserves. But is there any questions like race-wise, like that you have, you think?
Yeah. I think 2 things. One is, and this is like, I'm getting cold chills thinking about this because I have a moment like this during every event that I do. At what point did you know, like, I'm finishing this? Because that, like, I think it's such an it's such an empowering feeling. I remember, in my in my 100-miler, I remember specifically when I came through at mile 80, I came through, and before this, I knew I was going to finish. But at mile 80, I came through, I puked, projectile vomited everything I just eaten. And my crew like let me sit for a minute. They gave me, a banana, a little bit of electrolytes, and I was like, I know there's no doubt in my mind. So at what point was it for you? It sounds like when you got off the bike and you started running, you knew. But was there a specific moment?
Well, it wasn't then, unfortunately. I still had it in the back of my head. 13 miles is a long time, and that was the longest that I'd ever run prior to this race. I've only done half marathons. I've never done fulls. And leading up to my half marathons, and the longest I'd run to 10 miles.
Yeah.
I never really ran the full half. So still, no, it was about the 8-mile mark on the run where my body held up, because the first 3 or 4 miles, things start tweaking, stuff, you start feeling your body break down. And so you're like, I know mentally I can get through this race, but can my body get me through this race? And so you're so fearful of that on those 13 miles because the run's the hardest on your body.
Oh, yeah.
It just is. And so parts of my knee was hurting. But the good news is it wasn't parts of my knee that had hurt before. So I knew this was a new thing. And so I wasn't re-injuring something in the past. And that's a big scare, right? Because if you have the same reoccurring injury on certain races, eventually you're going to do something that never allows you to run again. So this was a new injury. So I knew I could push it.
Yeah.
I knew I could push that injury. And so that dude, think about what I just said. Like, you're trying to find every reason to keep going. Okay, this is a new injury. This is an old one. So I can force this injury to the limits. Like, what? When have you ever said that?
Yeah.
But that's the stuff that you're telling yourself. I'm like, this is a new injury. It doesn't feel great, but I don't think I'm going to do anything. It's going to be life altering to my knee where I can never run again. So we're going to keep grinding. So cold chills when you said that. It was about mile 8. So it's a 4-mile loop. So I'd done 2 loops. And
Okay.
I was going into that 3rd loop that I knew was like, I got one more loop.
Yeah.
Man. And that last loop was so beautiful because I knew I was going to make my time because I wanted to do it. It's crazy, man. I didn't know what a good time was. Looking back, I don't like my time, but all I heard was 8. If you get it under 8, you'll be good, Spence. I think I was just talking to too nice of people, honestly, because looking back at it,
it's probably good to be naive when it comes
7
to
is probably a better for you as a man to feel good about it. 8 was like the magic number is what I heard for 3 or 4 weeks prior. Spence, if you can get this thing in under 8 hours, you've had a good day. And I'm not saying it isn't, but looking back, I wish somebody would be like 7 because I'm a competitor.
Yeah.
And if you give me a scoreboard, or if you tell me to, hit this target, I'm going to hit it.
It changes things, yeah.
But the target to me was 8. And once I knew that I had killed that, then I really started soaking in what just happened.
Yeah.
And that's when it gets really emotional because you're like, what? For 6 months, I've completely sold out to this thing and found ways to make it work when I had all the reasons just to say, listen, don't do this. Everyone thinks you're crazy anyways. And then you do it and you're on this bike and you're swimming out in this ocean and you got one more lap. And there was a time where I was like, this isn't even, I'm finishing this thing. That's what I came here to do. I'm finishing this thing.
Powerful.
So what do I want this to look like for Spence? Now be a little selfish on this last lap. What's going through your head, kid? Start looking around, like, look who's here, look who's going to be there when you cross the finish line. There was a bunch of life lessons that last lap for me because it's spiritual. It's like you're finishing. Yeah. Good for you, kid. Like you did the dang thing. But be selfish right here. And I would suggest that for anyone that's not going out there to try to win the thing and you want to finish it and be an Ironman. And I think everyone should do hard shit, but like, that last lap, man, I just soaked it in. I was looking at these palm trees, and I was like, man, it's the last time I have to pass that palm tree. And I'm looking at these
That's a powerful feeling too.
Yes, and then like these, all the helpers that was helping during the race, man, I was the nicest.
You probably never give out more thank yous than you ever have in your life. Thank you.
I looked at a cop at one time because he was directing traffic. I was like, bro, it's the last time I'm going to see you. And he was like, he was tired of being there at that point. He didn't think it was funny, but I did. But I was just
I love that.
Started looking around and thinking about what I just accomplished was one of the coolest things. And then crossing the finish line, hearing your name, crossing the finish line, grabbing your medal, from a complete stranger. It's like even when you do cross it, you still don't think you're going to get the medal. Like it still hasn't clicked.
Yeah.
It just still hasn't. It's like, what? That just was another foot forward. It happens to have a big old thing on it or whatever. But then I think when they put that thing around your neck and say, finisher, and then you start looking for your family and friends and, you're just so thankful for the role that they played in it all. I mean, I'm hugging, everyone that I possibly can. And then at that point, it's just reflection. How did you do it? I don't know, man, but that moment where I knew I was going to finish, beautiful. Yeah. It was awesome, man. Yeah. It was awesome.
I love that. So when you come up on the finish, you see the finish line. Like what does that feel like? Because obviously knowing it's your last loop, that's one thing. But then when you physically see the finish line, and all right, like I'm about to get this medal. I'm about to see my family. Like, what was that feeling? Was there anything specific going through your mind? Were you just trying to be present, take it all in? Like, what did that look like?
I mean, you just black out at that point. There's nothing going through my mind that last. When you see the finish line, you just start hauling as fast as you can. Yeah. I mean, you go as far as your little legs, go as fast as your little legs will take you, and you just take off. And so, no, there wasn't much going through my head other than the fact that there's the finish line. There it is. I've been looking for it now for 7 hours.
Yeah.
And you just bust through that thing, and then you just, I mean, I just wept, man. I kept it together because I had a bunch of my little nephews there, and so I think I really didn't want them to see me cry, just because at that age, I know my dad wouldn't care. My brothers, like, they would get the emotional
Yeah,
side of
yeah.
this race, but maybe the little ones didn't, and I wanted them to know that I'm fine, right?
Mhm.
But once I got into the car and I was by myself,
Mm,
dude, I just lost it. I mean, I
yeah.
literally just, there was just so much emotion in the race, so many friends and family that I wanted to thank and appreciate for being there. And then when you get by yourself, just, I bawled my eyes out just thinking about what just happened. And then when I got home, get in the shower, and I sat in the shower for like an hour and just cried. I mean, it was just like, this is one of the coolest days of my life.
Yeah. Well, I think only you know everything you felt that day too. I think that's what makes it so special, is because whereas everybody knows what you did, only you know every low moment you had, every high moment you had, every moment of doubt that you had, and how, I think one thing that isn't really talked about is like how often you think about, especially when you have people that are supporting you, how often you think about, I don't want to disappoint so and so. Like, what is so and so going to think? What is my wife going to think? What's my mom going to think? Dad, the people that came to support me, like, what are they going to think if I don't finish?
Right.
Like that can be a really powerful moment. But then you also have those moments of, what are they going to think? What are they going to think about whenever I do cross the finish line?
Right.
And I'm sure you experienced a lot of those, right? So this is kind of the last Ironman question that I have.
Yeah.
But what did your lowest low look like? Like, what was there a moment in the race where you were like, and it could have been that moment on the bike when you ran out of nutrition, but what was like that low moment where you really thought like, okay, my race might be done right now, or when I get to this checkpoint? And then what clicked in your mind? Like, what made you think to keep going instead? Was there a specific moment?
It was definitely my family. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I think too, when I was even training for it, I knew people had already bought the tickets. Right? They burned it, like the ships were burned.
Mm-hmm.
Like there was no turning back.
Yeah.
Like they had already burned the ships. People had already bought plane tickets. People had already got rooms. They were going to watch me, so I had to perform. And so it was no different than the race. I think ultimately, yes, that was the ultimate driver. But all those little nuances in between me thinking about my family being there and I'm not going to let them down was just a battle within. So, I mean, it was just keep moving, Spence, just keep, I mean, you just say it the whole time to yourself. Don't stop. Just keep moving. Just keep moving. And then when you had the darkest, deepest, I'm done after this next transition, is when you were like, but what are they going to think?
Yeah.
But then you start wrestling with that. You go, well, no one else in my family has done anything like this.
Mm-hmm.
And they're still gonna be proud of me regardless. They're not gonna be mad that they came down here to try to support them. I got a close knit family. They're gonna be glad they supported me regardless whether I finish this thing or not.
Mm-hmm.
So you're wrestling with that. You're like, I'm doing it for them because they're gonna be there. That's why family and friends are so freaking important. But even then, I gave myself an out.
Mm-hmm.
They're still gonna be proud if I quit right now.
Yeah.
But that was the ultimate driver. Yes. What are they going to think if I don't finish this thing?
Yeah.
And then what am I going to have to tell my son when he grows up that daddy quit on his Ironman? It would still have been a beautiful story in that, because I would keep doing it until I did finish it.
Right.
But just family, man.
Yeah.
The stuff that means the most to you, and then your pride, obviously.
Yeah.
As a man, just says you're finishing this thing. Came too far.
It's definitely a different feeling. I mean, anybody who's done a big effort, like, you can attest to that you had those moments where you've already pretty well committed, like, I'm probably done, my race is probably done, and then you probably have a moment where you're also like, nope, like, I'm going, there's no stopping me. But then 10 minutes later you have that low again. And I think every person who's done an endurance event can agree with that. They've had those moments, and it's hard, like, especially when it's so back and forth, it can just really take a toll on you. But yeah, that's so powerful. I love hearing other people's experiences with that stuff, because everybody's different, but it's also so similar in a lot of ways. And it teaches you a lot of lessons. And
then the recovery piece, just I wanted to touch on that, because that's why I know fundamentally it's so important. Like, don't just sign up, do the training, and pretend like you're gonna perform at a high level, because I was hurt maybe a day after, 2 days after, but I'm good now.
Yeah.
Like, I'm back on my feet. I'm fine. Like 1 or 2 days. Like, and it was just that spot on my knee. Within 2 days, you would have thought I'd never ran the race.
Yeah.
That's how I knew that I adequately trained.
I would say that's a
strong
testament
enough-
to your training.
I
Yeah.
was strong enough to finish the race.
Mhm.
I just didn't fundamentally have all the pieces put together.
Yeah.
So if anyone's popped on here just to hear they're thinking about doing it, I'm saying do it. You're going to do great and you're going to
Yeah.
finish the thing, but don't lose time on the fundamentals of triathlon racing.
Yeah.
And that was something, Nick tried to stress to me, hey man, call me, let me help you with these things. I was like, man, how hard can this be? I'm just going to get out of the water,
Yeah.
get on a bike and then run. And that's where I lost probably 30 minutes of my time just trying to navigate the race.
Yeah.
It wasn't my body, and I would have gotten it under 7, right?
Yeah.
So it was my body was strong enough to do it, which was really cool.
Yeah.
Through all that I went through during the training piece, my body held up just fine. It was lost a lot of time fundamentally on the bike, fundamentally on the transition. So
yeah. Well, like you said, and that's a testament to your training. Your obviously your fitness level was there. It's just, I mean, any race in general, you're going to learn a lot about logistics, about your body, about your nutrition, all that stuff. So I'm excited to see you lace back up for another one. It might be, maybe it's when the third kid comes along or something. Is
I
that
want
the
to.
trend?
I really do. I think this one was tough too because I trained by myself. I tried to
Mhm.
get some people to do it, but nobody would do it. And I think that motivated me too.
Yeah.
The more people that I asked, they're like, no, man, that ain't for me. People that I thought for sure would do it was the more like, okay, man, I'm doing something special.
Yeah.
I'm scared to tell my wife that I want to do another one. So, I haven't said it out loud yet. But yes, I would. It's not. I just know I can do better.
Yeah. That's the hard part, honestly.
Know I can
yeah.
do better, and I think that's the hardest part.
Yeah.
And having known what worked and what didn't work in the workouts, I can be more strict on those workouts and be more efficient on those workouts because I was going at it so blindly that I think I don't have to necessarily spend 4 hours in the gym. There's ways to do this.
Yeah.
And knowing what I know now, I can be a lot more efficient, better time. But I don't know. I'm gonna have a Misogi every year, and who's to say next year isn't another Ironman or something different? I don't know. We'll switch it up.
Yeah, I love it, man. And I love what you said about it's hard to explain it to people, like the direct correlation of doing something challenging and that directly impacting your role and your impact as a father, as a husband, and just as a man in general. And I think it has a lot of ties. And it's hard to explain, but whenever you have a conversation with somebody, you're like, yes, I'm glad you say, and we didn't talk about that before this started either. Like you said that on your own, and I've said it to everybody here in the office. Like there's a direct correlation between doing something hard and that impacting you and your how you are as a man, as a father. So I'm glad that you said that.
Well, just empowering. Like everyone wants to feel empowered, and who's to say you can't empower yourself, right, man? Take your destiny in your own hands. And as a man, especially, obviously women too, but as men, it's in our DNA, right? Like we like to feel like we're needed, wanted, and we can do hard things. That's what we're supposed to do, right? We're supposed to ride around in trucks and arm wrestle and drink beer and like, you know what I mean? Like we want that for ourselves, but that stuff is pretty insignificant, really. I mean, it's really not that, but that's just that piece of us men that really want to be manly and we love so anyways, I'm not that guy. I do drive a truck, but I'm not, Mr. So I've got to put things in my life that makes me feel empowered as a man, and this was definitely it. And you're better for it. You're so much better for it. And so yes, I mean, direct correlation with doing hard things, because you've seen a bad day now, right?
Yeah.
Like what hard looks like. So your perspective on life is totally different.
Totally different.
I know how hard that day was, so I'm not going to complain about this red light. At least I'm sitting and I'm not feeling like I'm about to die on this bike. So
yeah, absolutely, man. Well, congrats on that. That's a huge accomplishment, and I love that we're able to kind of unpack it together a little bit.
Sure,
and it always feels good to do it, especially with other people in the room that have experienced similar feelings. So hats off, because I know Ironman logistics alone, man, the training, like all that stuff cannot go underspoken about, because it's a lot. So
hard, man.
Kudos to you, all those things. And so to wrap it up, really just a congrats and an acknowledgement on earning Small Business Owner of the Year through the Bowling Green Area Chamber of Commerce. That's a massive accomplishment. And it was a couple days after your Ironman. So
Mhm.
to get it all in 1 week, I'm sure your body and your emotions were like, what do we even do? What do we feel? How do we feel? So just want to wrap it up with how does that feel to hold that title? And
Yeah.
yeah, man, that's just huge.
I think you go into business or how about this? Once you're done with sports, you just kind of assume the trophies are over, and so you really don't. It's kind of like life's in session now, right?
Yeah.
And I was just always taught to work hard and figure it out. And so when I got the phone call, I guess 3 years ago, that I'd been nominated for Small Business Person of the Year, it's kind of the first time it kind of got brought back to my attention that this is a thing that you can be awarded by your peers in your town, and so that felt good. I remember trophies. I remember what those felt like, and everyone wants to feel valued and be a winner, I guess. And I remember when Doug called me 3 years ago, and I go, there were so many emotions behind that phone call because number one, I respected Doug, so well, but also because I remember my dad winning it. And, it was 23 years ago. So it's not like something I think about every single day.
Yeah.
But when he called me, I go, oh, shoot, this is a thing. And I remember thinking my dad was Superman that day, sitting at the plaza at the Holiday Inn at a table. My whole family, distant relatives, everyone's in town. And I remember I've got a big family. So the idea that we're all in the same space means it's a big deal. But 7, 8-year-old Spence knew that. I remember my dad on stage. I remember him giving his speech. I remember him coming off, and I remember thinking my dad had hung the moon. And so in that moment about 3 years ago is when I kind of was like, man, I would kind of like to win this thing. So it did mean a lot to me. I mean, I stayed nominated for 3-4 years past, and super grateful every year for being nominated. But this year was super special because it all just came at once. It felt like that with the Ironman. Then 2 days later, winning that award and feeling like you're, kind of on cloud 9 in our little town, right?
Yeah.
And Ironman and a Small Business Person of the Year in Bowling Green, Kentucky is kind of a big deal, even though I don't feel like a big deal. There was just so much emotion, and the adrenaline and the energy, I guess, that I'm running on now, it really isn't about me. It's just both of those things in my life. It took an army. Like it wasn't me. Like so many people helped me get to that finish line that day on the race, and so many people helped me in my business for the last 8 years in this town. The exhaustion behind both of those two things in the first week isn't my exhaustion. It's, have I gotten to everyone that deserved to hear from me that they were a part of this?
Yeah.
So I'm not sleeping a lot right now. I just want to make sure that people understand that this award was our award. Ironman, the people screaming for you is just as important as that guy running. There's no difference because without you, some of these people ain't making it. And without you, these people ain't showing up. They're cheering for nobody. And I wanted to make sure that piece didn't get lost on the Ironman. And then obviously in business, it takes a freaking army, man. We have about 100 employees now, and you come into my restaurant, and if we don't take the order, well, how about this? You have to do all these things right. Like we have to take the order right. We have to make the pizza correctly. Then we got to bake it correctly. Then we got to box it correctly. Then we got to make sure it gets to either a window, a delivery space, or up front in the dining room. And then we have to deliver it to you on time. And you have to open the box and you have to like it.
Yeah.
Right. And if any of those things goes wrong, we're screwed. I mean, it's such a team effort. So the idea that I'm going to get up here and accept this award and pretend like my small business, I'm the one that deserves this recognition is crazy to me. It was a great feeling. It's been a hell of a week. I love every single person that has called, texted me. It's just it's been an unbelievable week. But like I told my family yesterday, I'm still waking up and eating my Wheaties like the rest of us. And my bank account hasn't changed. And the people I love,
It hasn't?
No, it has
Come
not.
on.
It has not. And the people I love and care about are still those people.
Yeah, man.
And this was a way for me to land the plane, talk about it,
Heck yeah.
feel good about having it recorded because it's been a wild week for a 30-year-old kid. But come tomorrow, I will be, what will I be doing? Saturday morning, I'll be with my family, hanging out, hopefully. Sunday, we got a birthday party. I'm going to my little nephew's birthday party after I get done with here. I mean, it's back to normal, man.
Yeah.
And it's the next thing, right?
Yeah.
And that's what I told him. Like, until, I'm never satisfied. Yes, I'm going to be humbly, with so much gratitude, appreciate this week. But Mondays, it's behind me.
Yeah.
It's over with. And
Yeah.
this was a cool way, because I knew that about myself. Yeah, this is cool and all, but Monday is a new week. What are we going to go after next?
Yeah.
Right? Well, you got more in you. You're 30 years old. And so I knew that about myself. So when you asked me to do this, I was like, man, what a God moment, because I wasn't going to slow down long enough truly to write about it. I wasn't going to go talk to myself in a room and record it. I
Right.
don't feel comfortable doing that. But this was a cool way for me to unpack the week, kind of put it behind me in a weird way.
Yeah.
I think I'll always have gratitude for those men that won it before me and for the people that won it after me. I'm not here to water down the award. That's not what I'm going to do. And I promise you, I'm going to congratulate anyone that ever wins this award. But for me personally, I truly feel like I'm just getting started. I truly feel like I'm just now figuring out who I am as an individual and who I want to be inside the business space. And that's exciting.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. Well, what a way to end an awesome week, to get to talk about it. I'm grateful that you came on the podcast. I was like, I know that not only Spence Sheldon, but everybody in the Sheldon family are so busy and just so connected. I'm like, I hope Spence is free. Hope he's free this week. So
I'm trying to be better at that, man.
Yeah.
My family, my dad is just a freaking worker.
Yeah.
And we're all trying to learn, and Dad's doing a great job of leading us in this season. Just slow the freak down and let's enjoy some family. And because at the end of the race, man, I looked around and those are the only people there.
Yeah. Those are the people you need in your corner, man.
We're my family. And so I'm trying to compartmentalize and, figure out when I'm working, and when I'm playing, and when I'm with my family. And that's kind of where we're at. So don't ever feel like we're too busy. I hate when people say that, because we're trying to do better at that as a family. People forget people, our family, we need each other.
Yeah.
Right? And if we're all just running around like crazy, then I miss out time with my dad and my kids and vice versa. So appreciate it, man.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Well, I appreciate you coming on, brother.
Sergio, you killed it back there, baby.
Running it back and forth behind the cameras. I think the good looks may have ran the batteries down on these cameras, so he was running back and forth charging them. So apologies on the YouTube stream. Looks like they got more of Spence's FaceTime than they did mine today, so that's probably for the best. They got more time staring at Spence today.
Well, I know Sergio was doing a triathlon.
Yeah, he was. He probably got close to 5,000-6,000 steps just running between the cameras back there. But again, appreciate it, brother. Thank you so much, man. And
anytime.
Grateful for you and your family and the organizations you guys are affiliated with. And congrats again on the Ironman, Small Business Person of the Year.
Thank you.
2 huge accomplishments. So if you guys are watching on the stream, thank you very much. If you're listening on the podcast, thank you as well. Wraps up another episode of Adapt and Achieve. Catch you next time.
Boom, baby. We could have talked.